Welcome to WHMIS training. This is an awareness program on the updated Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. We will discuss WHMIS 1988 and the updated WHMIS 2015. WHMIS Overview. On 31st October 1988, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System WHMIS came into effect to address the hazard and safety issues of Canadian workers and their rights. On February 2015, Canada aligned WHMIS with Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, GHS, a global system developed by UN, and it was created to bring a global standard to chemical hazard classification. Legislation. The federal WHMIS legislation requires the suppliers of hazardous materials used in the workplace to provide information about health and safety issues. The provincial WHMIS legislation requires employers to obtain information about health and safety of hazardous materials and pass on to the workers. Adverse health effects. It can be of two types, acute and chronic. Acute health effects occur in a short period of time after exposure to hazardous materials, and chronic health effects occur slowly over time. Acute health effects are usually reversible, whereas chronic ones are the most dangerous and irreversible. Rights and responsibilities. Three parties must adhere to specific duties defined by the WHMIS legislation. They are the suppliers, buyers, and workers. Suppliers. They provide labels and safety data sheets for all hazardous products that they import or manufacture. Buyers. They make sure that safety data sheets are easy for workers to find and read. They make sure that containers in the workplace are labeled, and they provide WHMIS training. Workers are the ones who participate in WHMIS training and use their knowledge of WHMIS to work as safely as possible. Moreover, workers have the right to refuse work that they believe is dangerous, know about the hazardous products that they work with, and consult with the JHSC or the health and safety representative. Routes of entry. For a chemical to become dangerous for a person's health, it needs to be in contact with the body or enter the body through some means. These are routes of entry. They can be of four types: inhalation, ingestion, absorption, and injection. The most common way hazardous material can enter your body is through inhalation. Dust, fumes, and vapor can be inhaled through the mouth or nose. Inhaled materials enter the lungs and cause damage. It can even become worse if it enters the bloodstream. Ingestion is when dangerous chemicals get absorbed through your digestive system, which can occur in two ways. 1. If your hand is contaminated while you eat, and 2. Directly through food that have been left uncovered for a while and was in contact with chemicals. Absorption occurs through your skin. Some chemicals enter your skin and cause your skin to become sensitive, while others may enter your bloodstream through your skin. Injection. This is the method where chemicals directly enter the bloodstream through syringe needles, lacerations, and punctures. Hazard classification, symbols, and pictograms. There are three hazard groups: physical hazards, health hazards, and environmental hazards. Physical hazards. Classified according to their physical or chemical properties, such as reactivity, flammability, compressed gases, or corrosiveness. There are 19 physical hazard classes. Some examples: flammable gases, flammable aerosols, flammable liquids, flammable solids, oxidizing gases, oxidizing liquids, oxidizing solids, and gases under pressure. Health hazards. They are classified in this group based on their ability to cause adverse health effects, such as toxicity, respiratory sensitization, eye irritation, or carcinogenicity. There are 12 health hazard classes. Some examples: skin corrosion or irritation, serious eye damage or eye irritation, and acute toxicity. All WHMIS 1988 hazard classes have been addressed in WHMIS 2015. All GHS physical hazard classes have been adopted with the exception of explosive. New hazard classes have been included into WHMIS 2015. All of the health hazard classes address the hazards that were covered in WHMIS 1988. The biohazardous infectious materials class is not a part of the GHS, but was carried over from WHMIS 1988. Symbols and pictograms. Even if you are new to the workforce, the chances are that you have already seen these images on regular household products that you buy. These are some examples of some of the hazard symbols of WHMIS 1988. These are the updated WHMIS pictograms. Gas cylinder, for gases under pressure. Flame, for fire hazards. Flame over circle, for oxidizing hazards. Corrosion, for corrosive damage to metals, skin, and the eyes. Skull and crossbones, can cause death or toxicity with small exposure to amounts. Environmental hazards, may cause damage to the aquatic environment. Health hazards, may cause or suspected of causing serious health effects. Exploding bomb, for explosion or reactivity hazards. Exclamation mark, may cause less serious health effects or damage the ozone layer. Biohazardous infectious materials, for organisms or toxins that can cause disease in people or animals. 1988 symbols versus 2015 pictograms. The 2015 pictograms are universally accepted. WHMIS pictograms are denoted by symbols inside red diamond-shaped borders. The red borders over the black images are more prominent. Some WHMIS 1988 symbols are fully replaced and non-existent in 2015 pictograms. Labels. The importance of labels. WHMIS labels are the primary indication to the potential risks while working with hazardous products. WHMIS labels also contain precautionary information for the worker to protect himself from injuries while working with the hazardous chemical. Who applies labels? Manufacturers and suppliers. They must add labels to their product before supplying them to buyers. And employers. They must ensure that products received have proper labels on them. This is an example of a 2015 WHMIS label information document. It starts off with product identifier, followed by pictograms, followed by signal words, followed by the hazard statement, followed by the precautionary statement. And it has supplementary information in the bottom as well. Supplier labels must be written in English and French. They may be bilingual or available as two labels. Workplace labels. Workplace labels are used when a product used and produced in the same workplace, contents of a container were transferred from another container, supplier label is missing or illegible. Workplace labels must contain the product name matching the SDS, safe handling precautions, and a reference to the safety data sheets. Safety data sheets. In WHMIS 1988, it was known as Material Safety Data Sheet, and in WHMIS 2015, it was Safety Data Sheet or SDS. Information contained in Safety Data Sheet. 1. Identification. Identifies the chemical on the SDS as well as its recommended uses. It also provides the essential contact information of the supplier. 2. Hazard identification. Identifies the hazards of the chemical presented on the SDS and the appropriate warning information associated with those hazards. 3. Composition on ingredients. Identifies the ingredients contained in the product indicated on the SDS, including impurities and stabilizing additives. 4. First aid measures. Describes the initial care that should be given by untrained responders to an individual who has been exposed to the chemical. 5. Firefighting measures. Provides recommendations for fighting a fire caused by the chemical. 6. Accidental release measures. Provides recommendations on the appropriate response to spills, leaks, or releases, including containment and cleanup practices to prevent or minimize exposure. 7. Handling and storage. Provides guidance on the safe handling practices and conditions for safe storage of chemicals. 8. Exposure controls, personal protection. Indicates the exposure limits, engineering controls, and personal protective measures that can be used to minimize worker exposure. 9. Physical and chemical properties. Identifies physical and chemical properties associated with the substance or mixture. 10. Stability and reactivity. Describes the reactivity hazards of the chemical and the chemical stability information. This section is broken into 3 parts: reactivity, chemical stability, and other. 11. Toxicological information. Identifies toxicological and health effects information or indicates that such data are not available. 12. Ecological information. Provides information to evaluate the environmental impact of the chemicals if it were released to the environment. 13. Disposal considerations. Provides guidance on proper disposal practices, recycling or reclamation of the chemicals or its container, and safe handling practices. 14. Transport information. Provides guidance on classification information for shipping and transporting of hazardous chemicals by road, air, rail, or sea. 15. Regulatory information. Identifies the safety, health, and environmental regulations specific for the product that is not indicated anywhere else on the SDS. Lastly, 16. Other information. Indicates when the SDS was prepared or when the last known revision was made. The SDS may also state where the changes have been made to the previous version. You may wish to contact the supplier for an explanation of the changes. Education and training. Sufficient education and training is vital in WHMIS. Employers who have workers working with hazardous materials should properly train them. There are 2 types of WHMIS training. 1. Workplace specific, and 2. General education. So what is covered in workplace specific training? What is WHMIS? Duties and responsibilities, how chemicals enter the body, adverse health effects, labels and what they are required to display, pictograms, how to read the SDS, and general safety guidelines. What is included in general training? Specific safety precautions, emergency procedures, handling and use requirements, required PPE, where to find and how it is used, specialized policies and procedures, the meaning of all signal words and hazard statements on labels and SDSs in the workplace, and how to operate machinery and equipment safely. Protective measures. The hierarchy of safeguarding controls is a system used to prevent or eliminate exposure to hazards, in this case, chemical hazards. The hazard controls in the hierarchy are in order of decreasing effectiveness. Elimination or substitution, or engineering, administration, personal protective equipment, and hygiene. Elimination or substitution. If a process that uses a hazardous chemical can be eliminated entirely, then the hazard would effectively no longer exist. This can be done using several methods, including automating a process, thereby eliminating the need for an employee to come in contact with the hazardous product. Similarly, if substitutions can be made, which mitigate that hazard entirely, the control is equally as effective as elimination. Engineering. Engineering controls are used to remove a hazard or place a barrier between the worker and the hazard. Well-designed engineering controls can be highly effective in protecting workers and will typically be independent of worker interactions to provide this high level of protection. Engineered ventilation systems can provide exceptional protection from certain chemical exposure. Administration. Administrative controls include work practices, policies, procedures, training, and other guidelines that individuals must follow. While these may be less effective than eliminating the hazard altogether, they are an extremely important element in reducing the likelihood of an incident occurring. Several specific prevention techniques that are considered administrative controls are discussed throughout this training program. Hygiene. Practicing good personal hygiene reduces the probability of toxic materials entering the body and even carrying the substance outside of the workplace. You should always wash thoroughly after being in situations where a possibility of exposure exists. PPE should not be worn outside of your work area to reduce the likelihood of transferring any harmful substance into other environments. PPE, protective personal equipment. Personal protective equipment can be considered a last line of defense in protecting oneself from the hazards associated with exposure to harmful chemicals. PPE includes important items such as safety glasses, respirators, gloves, face shields, coveralls, and safety boots. Personal protective equipment should fit properly, be maintained regularly, and all employees should be trained in its proper storage, maintenance, and use. Safety guidelines. It is the employee's duty to always wear protective equipment. A machine lockout system protects you from the machine accidentally starting up when being set up, cleaned, or adjusted. If injured on the worksite, arrange appropriate medical treatment, including first aid treatment or arranging transportation to medical care, and report to your supervisor. Thank you for listening to WHMIS training. Please take the quiz and we will issue a certificate upon completion.